It's 8 p.m. Cairo local time and you are now watching Q News, and this is this hour's news bulletin. Here is what's happening. Israel has resumed its bombardment of Beirut's southern suburbs with more than a dozen airstrikes. That took place the day after Iran launched a missile attack towards Israel. In almost a year of cross-border fighting, nearly 1,900 people have been killed and more than 9,000 wounded in Lebanon. The European Union's Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has strongly condemned the Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel. Von der Leyen said that the spiral of violence is also leading to a generalized conflict in the region, and this must be avoided at all cost. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, in a joint press statement, joined her in the call for a regional ceasefire, stressing that the UK stands with Israel. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he was meeting security chiefs in Tel Aviv. That came a day after Israel was attacked by Iran in a strike that raised fears. Iran said the attack was over, barring further provocation, but Israel and the United States promised to hit back. The Egyptian government has condemned Israel's escalation in southern Lebanon, rejecting any attempts to impose a new reality on the ground that would undermine Lebanese sovereignty. Expressing deep concern over the developments, the government reiterated Egypt's full solidarity with the Lebanese people and government during this critical time. The government warned that the recent surge in violence signals a dangerous turning point and called for urgent international intervention to bring about an immediate ceasefire. Egypt confirmed it is making all efforts to preserve Lebanon's stability, unity, and sovereignty. In a significant escalation of tensions, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei criticized Western presence in the Middle East following Iran's missile attack on Israel. His remarks come amid increasing military operations from both sides, with Israel intensifying ground incursions into Lebanon and issuing evacuation orders for numerous villages.
In his first public remarks since Iran's missile attack on Israel, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei criticized the United States and European presence in the Middle East, labeling it a source of conflicts, wars, concerns, and enmities. Khamenei emphasized the regional nations could independently manage their affairs and live peacefully without external interference. He did not directly address the missile strike itself, which Tehran launched in retaliation for the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and several top commanders in Israeli airstrikes. These strikes have intensified tensions in the region, with Israel conducting extensive ground incursions into Lebanon, claiming to target Hezbollah infrastructure while reportedly impacting civilian structures and causing numerous casualties. Iran also cited the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran earlier this year as justification for its response. Iran's United Nations ambassador Amir Saeed Iravani defended the missile strikes, claiming they were a form of self-defense under the United Nations Charter in response to Israel's aggressive actions. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation forces issued evacuation orders for 24 villages in southern Lebanon, a region designated as a buffer zone following the 2006 war. Raises fears of a wider regional conflict as both sides intensify their military operations.
And for more analysis on the situation in Lebanon, I'll hand you over to Karim. Karim, over to you.
Thank you, Hani. For further analysis on the escalating tensions in Lebanon, we are now joined by Dr. Muhammad Osman, the international relations expert. Welcome, Doctor. Now, do you think that the Iranian strike against Israel could affect the course of the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip?
Thank you, Karim, for having me. Definitely, the escalation in Lebanon had a detrimental effect on the efforts to reach a final ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. As we can see, the entire conflict in the Middle East right now is completely interconnected between Israel on the one hand and the non-state actors in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, backed by Iran. It rather represents a war by proxy between both sides. And of course, with the recent escalation and the Iranian strike on central Israel yesterday, using about 200 missiles or more, it definitely sends warning signals that this might escalate into an actual regional war.
What is your comment on the developments in the Middle East generally, and will the intensity of the confrontations rise further in the coming period?
It seems that we are on a trajectory towards more and more escalation, unfortunately. It doesn't seem that many powers are scrambling, or international powers are scrambling to contain the ongoing escalation, specifically between Iran and Israel at the moment. President Biden, a few moments ago, or a couple of hours ago, said that he is against, or he does not support, any Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. However, that doesn't mean that the United States is trying to restrain Israel or prevent it from launching a retaliatory strike against Iran, which could further escalate matters, especially with what we have seen with what Axios has told us today, that Israel could potentially target Tehran, the Iranian capital, major infrastructure facilities, and even members of the Iranian leadership, and oil rigs and oil refineries, and some even spoke of targeting the nuclear facilities. So we are on the precipice of a very dangerous escalation.
Right. Now, as you mentioned, the statements and news reports have been calling or have been stating about the possibility of targeting oil and nuclear sites. As you mentioned, that Joe Biden has stated that the United States does not support Israel in targeting nuclear sites. However, the possibility of oil sites is still on the table. How do you think this is going to change the discourse of the escalation in the region generally?
Well, we cannot deal with a retaliatory strike on the Iranian nuclear facilities or nuclear program as a fait accompli. Far from it. Probably the United States will exercise substantial pressure for them to prevent them from taking such a course or targeting.
Do you think statements by Joe Biden saying that the United States is not supporting Israel in targeting nuclear sites in Iran, you think that would be some sort of pressure on Israel?
Of course it is. That's an indication of pressure. However, whether this pressure will actually yield the desired results is questionable, especially given the United States record in exerting pressure on Israel over the past year, better part of the past year. The United States has claimed that it has exerted a surmountable amount of pressure in order to prevent Israel from escalating in Gaza and then in Lebanon. However, they have failed miserably to prevent them from doing so. So there is reason to have fears that they might fail in containing them. However, this time the consequences might have a very far reach and have far more worse consequences, because if Israel actually targets the nuclear facilities or the nuclear program of Iran, that means an all-out war between both powers. Iran has thousands of missiles. It will launch and target the entirety of Israel if that happens. And in retaliation, Israel will launch more and more strikes on Iran, and this might even drag the United States into the conflict, and this is the last thing that the United States wants. So that's the only thing that gives us a bit of hope that the United States pressure this time might succeed in containing or curtailing the impact and the scope of the Israeli retaliation. However, Israel will retaliate, and it will retaliate very heavy-handedly in response to the Iranian attacks, because yesterday's attacks were very much different than the ones we saw in April. Yesterday's attacks left out massive destruction in many parts of Israel, and it actually Netanyahu wanted these results and wanted this escalation to take place in order for it to be a pretext to engage in further escalation.
Finally, Dr. Mohammed, aside from the United States, what do you think of the international reaction to the Iranian attack yesterday?
It's rather hypocritical, because we have seen France and the European Union and Germany and Japan and most of the major powers and the major countries that are allied with the United States condemning and strongly condemning the Iranian attack, neglecting that Israel actually was the one who started this entire chain of escalation by targeting Iran on more than one occasion, especially with the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in central Tehran. That was a direct attack, the violation of international law and the UN Charter. So actually, Iran was theoretically within the right to defend themselves and to retaliate in some way. So, and of course, if we speak of further Israeli acts of aggression against Lebanon, a sovereign state, a member state of the United Nations that is being invaded right now by Israel and that is being decimated and destroyed by Israeli airstrikes, or the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories that has been going for the past 57 years, and the ongoing genocide in Gaza. I think international law is definitely not on the side of Israel, but that doesn't really matter to these great powers, and that chose to selectively condemn Iran and turn a complete blind eye on Israel's atrocities elsewhere.
That was Dr. Mohammed Osman, international relations expert. Thank you very much for your insights and analysis. Now we go back to Hani in the studio. Hani.
Thank you, Kareem. In a dramatic escalation of hostilities, a timeline reveals a series of deadly confrontations between Israel and Hezbollah, culminating in Iran's launch of nearly 200 missiles into Israel. The United Nations Security Council is holding an emergency session to discuss developments in the Middle East. The session was convened by several nations to address Israeli threats to regional security and the ongoing aggression against Lebanon.
يبدأ مجلس الأمن الآن.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for hostilities to cease in Lebanon. His statement was made during a Security Council meeting that called for the full implementation of Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701. Guterres added that the world should never lose sight of the tremendous toll that this growing conflict is taking on civilians, as well as the systematic violations of international humanitarian law.
Situation in Lebanon. Since then, things have gone from bad to much, much worse. And other non-state.
Meanwhile, France's UN representative Nicolas de Rivière has expressed his country's opposition to any Israeli ground operation in Lebanon. He emphasized the need to hold the escalation in Lebanon and prevent the conflict from spreading further. In related news, the UK's permanent representative to the UN, Barbara Woodward, has condemned what she called Iranian aggression against Israel. In her remarks to the Security Council, Woodward stated that Israel has the right to defend itself from any Iranian attacks. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Greenfield, has reaffirmed Washington's support for Israel and its right to self-defense. She added that the U.S. would continue its efforts to bring an end to the war, both in Gaza and Lebanon. Russia has dismissed the possibility of nuclear talks expansion. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson "There's no point in dialogue with Washington without respect." Also said that Russia is against isolating negotiations from military and political realities.
Фактором стратегической стабильности, а именно на этом настаивает российская сторона и настаивает последовательно.
The Eastern Ukrainian Military Command received an order to pull back troops from the eastern hilltop town of Vuhledar. Control of Vuhledar, which lies at the intersection of the eastern and southern battlefields, is significant because it will ease Russia's advance as it tries to pierce deeper behind the Ukrainian defensive lines.
Вищим командуванням надано дозвіл на здійснення маневру по виведенню підрозділів з Вугледару.
President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Tuesday that Ukraine is set to become one of the key global contributors to security and a very strong player in the global arms and defense technology market. Speaking at the Second International Defense Industries Forum, Zelensky listed the new heights reached by the Ukrainian defense industry over the past year. He mentioned successes in drone, missile and howitzer production, as well as a new repair base for foreign-made armored vehicles.
Української зброї, далекобійну ракету дрон «Паляницю». В Україні виробили в 25 разів більше боєприпасів. Пройшла успішно льотні.
And now I'll hand you over to Selma for the latest news in Africa. Selma.
Thank you, Hani. And now we move to the latest developments in Africa. The Libyan House of Representatives has voted unanimously to appoint Najia Issa Belqasim as governor of the Central Bank of Libya and Marai Muftah Rahil El Barasi as his deputy. The spokesman for the council, Abdullah Bilhaq, stated that yesterday's session resulted in the approval of the agreement and the appointment of the new administration. The bank's board of directors will be formed within 10 days of the approval of the agreement. Tunisia's parliament has approved a law stripping the administrative court of its authority to adjudicate electoral disputes 9 days before the presidential election. Out of a total 161 lawmakers, 116 voted for the major amendment to the electoral law. The current Parliament Assembly was elected in 2022 on an 11% voter turnout after Said dissolved the previous parliament. Egypt has welcomed members of the African Peace and Security Council in Cairo. Egypt's South Sinai has received the Esri SAG Award for Excellence in Geographic Information Systems. Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli oversaw the ceremony held for the South Sinai Governorate's achievement of the Global Excellence Award. South Sinai becomes the first governorate in Egypt and North Africa to receive this international award. Ivory Coast's ruling party has expressed its support for President Alassane Ouattara, seeking a fourth term in 2025. Top officials of Ouattara's party passed a motion expressing their desire to do everything possible to ensure that the party becomes the undisputed winner of the next presidential election in 2025. The UN Security Council has voted unanimously to extend the mandate of the Kenya-led multinational force helping to tackle violence in Haiti. The mission was authorized last October to assist Haiti's police force. Led by Kenya, the force currently has around 410 police officers on the ground and is expected to grow to around 2,500. The Council has brushed off a call from Haiti to start talks on transforming it into a UN peacekeeping mission. And now we move back to Hani for more news and developments.
Thank you, Selma. This brings us to the end of our news bulletin for this hour. Here are today's main stories. Israel has resumed its bombardment of Beirut's southern suburbs. The Egyptian government condemns Israel's escalation in southern Lebanon. And the United Nations calls for hostilities to cease in Lebanon.
Exactly 1 week ago, I briefed the Security Council about the alarming situation in Lebanon.
These are all the news we have for now, but please don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. For real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you very much for joining us.